Hi, this is Steve from Office365mon.com. Today we're going to be looking at the Distributed Probe and Diagnostics feature. The Distributed Probe and Diagnostics feature, also known as the agent, the Distributed Probe agent, works in conjunction with our cloud-based probes to enable you to issue health probes from the different locations across your organization where you have users located at. Just to give you a little sneak peek of what you get with that, we'll start here by looking at the basic reports. If we go into basic reports and we go down here to geo performance, for example, this is real live data. This is from real customers that have installed the Distributed Probe and Diagnostics agent where their particular users are located at. And you can see as we zoom in here, each of these push pins represents a different location where an agent's been installed, and they all have kind of a greenish yellow circle underneath. And that's an indicator of what the performance is like at that particular location. So basically, the lighter the color, the faster it is. The deeper and darker the color, the slower the response time is from that location. So for example, if I hover here over this location in Nebraska, we see their average response time is 1.5 seconds. But if we go down here to Arizona, where there's much lighter color underneath, we see their average response time is 0.28 seconds. You can see you can also filter that by a particular date as well as by a particular service. And really the idea behind that is to give you a sanity check of what are other Office 365 customers seeing from a performance perspective in the same geographic regions where maybe you have your users at. So why don't we start out by going into Configure Office 365 Mon. And really the only point to make right here is that before you can go and use the Distributed Probe agent, you first have to come in and create your Office 365 Mon subscription. You have to do all of the configuration here for your cloud-based probes for your subscription. And then once that's done, then we can go ahead and we can get into installing and configuring the distributed probes. And we do that because the distributed probes, as part of their health check process, what they're going to do is they're going to connect back to the Office 365 Mon cloud service to determine what it is they are supposed to monitor. And they get that information from whatever you've configured here for your Office 365 Mon subscription. So if we go in here to configure Office 365 distributed probes, you'll see right here there's a link here that you click on to go ahead and download and install the distributed probe agent. Once you do that and run the executable, you'll have a set of files like you see here. It actually installs a Windows service that's going to be issuing those health probes. But before it does that, there's a configuration utility you need to run. So you'll see right here the Office 365 Mon Health Probe config.exe. So we'll simply right click on that. You have to select Run as Administrator because it's going to go ahead and need to be able to start and stop that service. So to configure it, we'll go ahead, we'll enter our subscription ID, which we get from this same page right here. We'll enter the access code. This is just an additional security measure. You get one of those right here. We can say get a new access code here, and then you can see we can just copy that, and then we can go back and we can paste it in here. The public site, this is part of the diagnostics piece of the agent. So one of the things it will do is if it can't connect to Office 365 or if a health probe doesn't complete successfully, it'll go through a series of diagnostics that we'll talk about in a bit. And one of the things it will do is it will try and ping a non-Office 365 site out on the internet. So in this case, this is the default value that we have for the agent, so that's what we're using here. For the location, if we go ahead and click this, this will bring up a dialog where we can tell it where exactly this particular agent is being installed at. And again, going back to that report we were just looking at where it showed all these push pins in these different locations, the way those push pins came about in terms of their location was someone had come in here, they've installed the agent, and they've told us, by entering this information where that agent is located at. So you enter as much of your location information for this specific agent as you would like, make sure it looks okay, and then click the OK button to save that information. The next thing we'll look at is the saved credentials. Saved credentials is an optional piece of the distributed probe agent. And here's how it works. As I mentioned earlier, the distributed probe agent will connect to the Office 365 Mon cloud service to get that configuration information for the subscription, so it knows what it is it's supposed to be monitoring it. And in order to do that, it needs to make an authenticated request to the cloud service. So we know that we're not just giving the subscription configuration information to anyone. It has to be someone that's authenticated and that is an administrator on the specific Office 365 on subscription. So in order to do that, we need to have a way to connect to authenticate to that web service, to the Office 365 on cloud service. And we can do that in a couple ways. One way is when we're done, let's go back here for a second. When we're done, we can just click the Save button, and if we don't have any saved credentials, then what will happen is the Distributed Probe configuration tool here will go ahead and transfer us over to Azure Active Directory, and Azure Active Directory will have you go through your standard login process. And when you're done, it will hand back to us an access token, and then we'll use that token to connect to our cloud service. The limitation with that is that those access tokens are really good for a maximum of 90 days, which means once every 90 days, once every 3 months, you would have to come in, you'd have to run this utility again, just like I've done here, and all you would do is just click the Save button. It would take you back to Azure Active Directory again, you'd enter your credentials, would get a new access token, and so we go. The other thing about that, though, is that not only can that token expire, or will it expire after 90 days, but it will also expire if there are other things that happen, such as, for example, you change the password for whatever account you use when you click the Save button. When the password changes, that invalidates all the access tokens, so you would have to come back here again every time you do that. So we have this other option called Save Credentials, which we'll use here. And the Save Credentials, you need to enter the account that is an administrator on the Office 365 on subscription. Again, it doesn't require any sort of rights inside of Office 365 itself. In fact, if you're using this feature, we actually recommend that the account you use not have an Office 365 account. So in fact, what we've done is we've created an account in Azure AD that we use just for this. It doesn't have any Office 365 access. It doesn't have any mailboxes, no access to any sites, anything like that. It's only used just for this purpose. So we go ahead and we'll enter the account name there. We'll enter the password for that account. We can test it out to see if it's valid or not. It says those credentials worked, okay. So we go ahead and click the OK button. So just so you know what's going to happen there, like we tell folks, we never ever store any credentials up on our cloud service. So when you're using the saved credentials, like we just entered there, what will happen is it will be saved locally, just on this machine, in an encrypted part of the configuration file for the Office 365 on Distributed Probe and Diagnostics agent. So we'll never store or push those credentials anywhere else. It will only be stored here on this local machine. And again, this is just an option. By doing this, basically you don't have to come back here and update these credentials again until the password for this account that you used for saved credentials expires. So as an example, what we do at Office 365 on is we created this account. It doesn't have any rights to any data anywhere, so we created a password policy just for this one account so that the password never expires. And we only use it just for this connection for our Distributed Probes agents. And so what that means then is that once we set this up, we never have to come back here and run this configuration utility again unless we want to change something. But otherwise, we don't have to come back and touch the agent again. So it really lowers our TCO, our total cost of ownership. So once we've got this part set up, now you can see all of the different sorts of things that we can get notifications for from this agent. Because what's going to happen is after we click the Save button, then the agent here will go ahead, it'll pull that configuration information down from the Office 365 on cloud service, and then it's going to start issuing health probes from the specific location where we've installed it. But you can see here now we can set notifications for things like if a health probe that it sends off takes longer than X number of seconds, in this case 40 seconds to complete a health probe, then send me a notification. So email, text, and webhook if you have it configured. We're also able to break out the network performance part of these health probes separate from the execution of the probes themselves. So that is really important because then it allows you to identify when you have network performance issues at a particular location. So here we're saying if the network round trip part of a health probe takes longer than X number of milliseconds, send me a notification. In addition to that, we also check the performance for connection to these other sort of core services that are part of the Office 365 experience. So as you see here, again, from this particular location, we're saying if it takes more than 50 milliseconds to connect to our DNS or our proxy servers, then send us a notification. Also, if it takes more than 100 milliseconds to connect to any of those public endpoints for the Office 365 services that we use, like SharePoint Online, Exchange Online, and OneDrive, then again, send us a notification. So we get this whole range of performance metrics and notification thresholds that we can use for the different Office 365 services. So once we're done then, we'll just go ahead and we'll click the Save button here, and that will go ahead and save our configuration. It tells us it's been saved, and then it will go ahead and it'll start issuing health probes. In addition to that, there's a few settings that apply to all the distributed probe agents. So again, it's important to understand all those configuration values that we just established on that agent that we were just looking at in terms of how long to wait before sending a notification for how long it takes to execute a health probe or what the network performance is like. Those can all be different at every different location where you install an agent. So that gives you the flexibility to be able to keep them all the same if your network infrastructure is the same everywhere, or if you have different locations where maybe you have different performance metrics, different network capacity, then you can set different notification thresholds for those other locations. But in addition to that, there's other features that we can set that apply to all of them. So the first off is send me a notification if a computer or an agent, is really what that means, doesn't check in a certain period of time. And so that really gives you the capability to stay on top of agents. Maybe if a machine is getting patched or a machine has gone down and you're not aware of it, those agents, they check in once an hour by default to get that configuration information that I was describing. So you can ask to get notified if it takes longer than a certain number of minutes. We also have the idea of what we call crowdsourced alerts. And really what this is saying with the geo-aware alerts, once you install an agent, one or more agents, then one of the things that we can do for you is to say, okay, well, if any other customer has installed an agent that's within X number of miles or kilometers from any of your agents and they experience an outage, then we can send you a notification in that case as well. And that's what this checkbox means. So again, the idea behind that is to try and keep you aware if there are regional Office 365 or Azure issues that could be potentially impacting the users you have in that specific location. And then finally, the internet egress changes. What we're doing here is we're monitoring for changes in the entry point that you have from that agent, from that particular geographic location, out to the internet. Because sometimes when those things change, that can cause performance problems itself as your traffic starts getting routed to a different location through a different set of services. From a reporting standpoint, we looked at one of the reports in the basic reports. When we go into the advanced reports, we have a whole series of reports that we can look at, and we'll look at some of those now. So SharePoint network time, that's going to tell us what the performance is like for those health probes at each of the different locations where we have those agents installed, and broken down by service, meaning by SharePoint versus OneDrive for Business. So we can click on the cloud items here to take off the cloud-based probes. So now we're just looking at what the performance is like for these different services across these different locations. So we can compare what our performance is like just from the network experience part of the Office 365 probes from these different locations. This is just looking at the recent requests, so those health probes that we've issued over the last hour or two, but we can also go back here to our daily summaries as well, so we can get an idea of whether the performance that we're seeing right now, if that's the same or similar to what we normally see from this particular location, or if we're slower now than we typically are. And again, we can just drill on things, take them off, if we just want to look at a particular service, or if we just want to look at a particular location, then we can do that as well. And now we're just looking at the health probes from this particular location, what they historically have been day over day, to see if the performance we have now is in line with that, or if we're experiencing extra slow performance that particular day. Same sort of thing with our server and network performance. When we look at this, this is going to show us by host name meaning by the individual location where we've installed the agent, what the breakdown in performance is for those health probes that we're issuing. And what I mean in breakdown, I mean we're looking at for each of these health probes that are executing, how much time is it spending on the server, meaning your actual server in the Office 365 cloud, your Office 365 tenant itself. How much time is it spending in your tenant processing that request versus how much time is it spending on our network. And then again, we break this down not only by network time and server time, we also break it down by service. So if we want to look at this particular agent, maybe we just want to look at the OneDrive performance. So here we can see what's going on. And this is actually kind of an interesting view right now, because we see that just recently our last health probe that we issued took a really long time up on the server. And again, we can look at all the different agents where we have this installed, so we can see what the performance metrics is like at those other locations. And you can see some consistency here, right? Because this agent also is showing now recently really long times at these on the server side up in our tenant itself. So it looks like we're having some possibly some performance issues going on in our tenant itself right now. So that's a good way to use that data. The ping time, this goes back to checking out the ping time to those resources, those core services, the Office 365 endpoints, as well as DNS and proxy. Here we see it spread across all of our different agents. Again, this is just a recent request. We can also go back in and we can look at our daily summaries as well to see what it looks like in there. So again, we understand, is the performance we're seeing right now, is that what we typically see, or is it something that is out of the ordinary? If we see some data in there that looks troublesome, then we can drill into it by individual host. So we can go in here to our service ping time by host, and now again we can look at the individual locations where we've installed the agent. We can see here we're looking at all of the services that we're checking the ping time for. But again, if we want to drill down into a specific service, say we want to look at SharePoint, what's the ping time dit like? So now we can see what's that performance like just for that service. And we also see the IP addresses that are being resolved to for that particular service from that particular location. SharePoint and OneDrive usually will just see one or two different IP addresses that it resolves to. Exchange is always interesting because you see a vast number of IP addresses that Exchange Online resolves to. So you can see if you're having problems to particular endpoints with Exchange Online. And again, here we're just looking at the recent probes, but we can also look at our daily summaries and our monthly summaries to see, hey, are we in line with what we normally see or not? The host network performance, I'll take off the cloud data here, so we're just looking at our distributed probes. This is also good because this gives you a time-based view of what the Office 365 network performance is like for your users by location and by time. And you see it's broken down in 15-minute increments, so we can view the performance to find different times of day, maybe when the performance is slower at different locations. In case our users call and say, hey, Office 365 is slow, you can look and say, hey, are you in a location that's slower than others, or is it a particular time of day that's slower than others? And that's the other piece here. You see these locations are broken down by color as well, so you can see the users that are in the location represented by red, their network performance is actually significantly slower than all of the other locations where we have users. So if we have users that are moving around and maybe they're moving into from a different location to a location represented by red, then maybe they may call help desk and go, hey, Office 365 seems slow today, and that gives you some background, some context around that. Same thing with day of week. We'll take off the cloud-based probes again here, and now you can see there may be certain days of the week where different locations are slower than other times as well. The internet egress points, like I mentioned before, when those change, they can cause performance issues at times. So we can go through here and we can see a history, agent by agent, location by location, when they change. So if you notice a performance issue starting at a particular day and time, you can go back here and see, well, did you have any changes in your egress location at those times as well? And then down here as well, we have a whole series of other reports as well. For example, if we look at the geo availability, we'll take off the data labels here, so we can see what's the availability like, what's the uptime like at these different locations where we have agents. And basically, the bigger the circle, it means the more outages they've had, so the lower the availability. So we can see the availability there versus another location down here which has somewhat better availability. And then finally, if we're going down here, we can also look at things like the remote agent. So, I mean, there's all of these other reports in here that are different views of that same sort of, some of the other data points that we've already looked at. But then finally, the remote agents here. This will tell us all of the different agents that we have installed, that we've ever installed. It will show us what version of the distributed probe agent we have installed at that particular location. And then finally, this last configuration request here, this will tell us when the last day and time was that these different agents made a configuration request, so we know, how up to date they are with the configuration for our particular subscription. So that's it. That's a review of the Distributed Probe and Diagnostics agent.